Alright, take two. Alright, so what I want to talk about, I want to finish up. I want to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to try to raise my voice here. Okay, first of all, my video software immediately makes a cut in my clip at 9:15, at 9 minutes 15 seconds. So I've been doing these in 9:15 clips. I figured out how everything works on YouTube. I'm kind of a noob at this, and so I decided to do everything in 9:15 clips, other than like one or two things. I think I have one that's 10:23 or something. But two, like, I'm gonna raise my voice when I say this. I know as soon as people start commenting, a big complaint is gonna be, I can't hear you. Please trust me. I wish I had a better setup. I wish I could afford an expensive microphone and a sound card and all that shit, but I can't. So either I found that I can hear it really well on headphones. So if you get headphones and try it out, see what you think. If you have better speakers than me, then you can try jacking it up loud. It doesn't matter. I mean, I know it's not the greatest. Okay, so those two things out of the way. Public service announcement. Okay, so I was talking about jazz. And this is the second take. Like, I got really rambly last time, so I'm going to try to be a little more concise. Okay, so we did this with rock and roll, and like I said, I still stand by the fact that rock and roll is my favorite music to play. And what we talked about in rock and roll is there's two things that make it rock and roll. One, feel, and two, instrumentation. Okay, well, okay, and we talked about how there's an emphasis or an elongation of the backbeat in rock and roll music. Well, I consider rock and roll music. You can have your metalcore and all that shit if you want, but that's not rock and roll to me. Anyway, so we're gonna have to define jazz. Well, one thing about defining jazz is that if it hasn't been tried in jazz, then it's probably not possible to try it. So jazz is a very variegated form of art at this point in history. After it's not even really been. I mean, it's been maybe 100 years since jazz started to form. Maybe 100, maybe even a little less. And so I mean, there's been people who play jazz harpsichord, jazz sitar. I mean, I think it's a little goofy, but at the same time, like, people have tried. I don't deny that there are many talented people who have tried some very interesting things in jazz that really aren't traditional, but that are jazz. They are jazz. One of the things that really should be, I think, in definition for jazz, is that jazz is based on the blues. So, and so is rock and roll, by the way. But if it's jazz, it should be based on the blues. That's just a fairly good. That's a pretty good. And the other thing is swing. And this is the topic that's going to take me 6 minutes and maybe even more to talk about in jazz. See, man, if you listen to like some of the old recordings of like the Dixieland Dixieland bands and stuff like that, the swing is there's a huge, very hard swing to Dixieland jazz. Chicago jazz, which was like, I mean, no one can really say where it originated. There was jazz in New York City very early. There's Chicago. And every form of, in these different areas, New Orleans, and these different areas, the jazz sounded very different. But there's a very hard swing to Dixieland jazz. Chicago jazz was more what you would expect from like a Frank Sinatra type swing, I think, and stuff. I don't know. I mean, I'm not the jazz historian, but I'm just trying to give you a general idea. Well, so jazz swing has changed over the course of the history of jazz, and what they do in jazz, and you'll hear it very prominently in swing styles, which are like big band. There are lots of good big bands, but what you'll hear is that essentially what they do is they establish a 4/4 rhythm and then the lead instruments play in 12/8, or they play triplets in 4/4, essentially. So it creates a 3-on-2 feel, like a overlap of these, an overlap of 3 and 2. So that's very common in swing styles. Small group jazz, which is that's probably my favorite form of jazz. I like big band styles, but I like the more esoteric big band stuff. Like I do much more. You're much more likely to hear me listening to Charles Mingus than you are to Woody Herman Orchestra or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with the Woody Herman Orchestra. He's an accomplished musician. It's just that I don't like that kind of jazz all that much. But the swing styles are very triplety feeling. And then when bebop came along, it got even more complex, because what people like Charlie Parker and Max Roach, I think really, I mean, you want to look at a really good album to hear bebop swing style is Clifford Brown and Max Roach. That's what it's called. Clifford Brown can play swing so damn good. I don't think anybody played swing as good as Clifford Brown. And Max Roach is very loose on the ride cymbal. So, and it's almost as if every beat is a little different. So the emphasis changes on every beat. And there is that kind of triplety, but it floats. It's not like da 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 da. It doesn't. Which is very typical of swing styles. But it's very like, of course, I'm doing it really lame, and in swing styles, it's like there's a certain hip, cool way to play. But bebop was even more hipster than, I mean, it was as hipster as hell. But very nuanced beat. Like every beat is just a little different. There's sort of a loose triplet feel, but it's not exactly a triplet. And that's a very tough thing when you play with a good bebop band, a good small group band. Establishing swing, you have to have a really good drummer. It just amounts to that. Establishing swing is the most important thing in that group. And I think that really could go for big bands as well. Although big bands, I mean, there's like I don't even know where to start with swing. It's so complex. I mean, I have started, but I mean, what you have to think about when, as a jazz musician, is, man, I don't know, like when I'm playing jazz piano, I have a tendency of putting the comp on kind of like a blues rhythm. A lot of people don't like it when people comp that way. So a lot of people prefer to have the comps to be more oriented towards the downbeat, and that creates a very different feel. I almost would liken it, I mean, this is racist as hell, but black feel and white feel. I swear to God, like, I mean, I stayed with a guy who played with the Mel Torme Orchestra, and his view of jazz and mine, like, which is Bud Powell and John Coltrane, like my two heroes, like, were worlds apart. And I'm definitely gonna have to do a third segment. But to make a long story short, like, there's a very if you can play a good swing feel, it takes years to learn how to do it, but if you can play a good swing feel, you can play jazz. Now, when it comes to, and there's so many things I want to touch on. I'm just going to do a bunch of these. I hate waiting for the clips to digest and